Why are you running for governor?
Well, I mean, if it was just me, I probably wouldn't. I'm 56 years old, but um, I'm a father and a grandfather, and I'm just afraid with the political climate these days, the just the vitriol and the division amongst us. I think it's not good. And then on a more personal level, I've worked my whole life on the farm to leave a legacy for my kids. And I feel, with nationally with, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I just think there's some authoritarian tendencies afoot. I'm just worried that I won't be able to pass my legacy to my kids. And there's a bigger legacy here, the legacy of our democracy. And I feel that, you know, uh, if you think it's under attack, you can sit and watch it happen, or you can get involved and try to make a difference. And so um, I decided to run for governor because I believe working class people are getting left behind, squeezed out. And I think that's the other reason I needed to run because that's the kind of people I come from, working class. And um, the Texas government and the government nationally hasn't really advocated for working people. They talk a good game, but they don't really walk the walk. So those are all the reasons why I'm running.
Yeah, you talk about you want to be a governor for Texans who have been squeezed out. You mentioned the working class here. If you were to be elected as governor, what would your priorities be in office?
Uh, the priorities are going to be the needs of all working families everywhere, and that's going to be, to advocate for higher wages. Our minimum wage has been stuck at 7.25 since 2009. 40% of its earning power has eroded due to inflation and tariffs. So I would advocate for a $15 minimum wage right away. Now, don't get that confused. That's a minimum wage. I don't believe that's a living wage, but we'll start there. And I know that some of the, um, I guess, detractors on that would say it might hurt the economy or hurt small business, but I disagree. Um, if you can pay people a wage where they can afford their life, they'll have more money to spend in their local communities, which means that small business will be able to generate more revenue. So that's one of the things I would do right away to advocate for working people. And I would prioritize their needs over the wants of billionaires and big corporations, which I think our state government has catered to way, way, way too often.
Your website mentions public education, and you talk a little bit about the education savings accounts. This was something that Governor Greg Abbott, this was a huge priority for him the past two legislative sessions. It finally got done this past session. You don't seem to be a fan of that. Where do you stand on public education? What would you do with this ESA program if you were elected?
Well, where I stand is we need to invest in our public education, and we really haven't invested in our public education in a long time. Republicans have been in charge for 30 years. We've got a governor who's in his third term, and no matter what metric you measure our performance in nationally when compared to other states, we're in the bottom third. Far as the education savings account, I'd get rid of it and take that money and put in public schools. Fundamentally, I'm opposed to it because everybody pays taxes for the public good, and public schools are there for all kids, no matter where they're from, what financial strata they're in, no matter what obstacles they face. Those schools are there, and they're held accountable to certain standards. These public or private schools don't have the same accountability, and I'm opposed uh, against public funds being spent for private use. And I would liken it to like if the road in front of your house was being maintained because it had gotten potholes in it and had some issues with wear and tear on people's vehicles, you can't, as a taxpayer, say, well, I don't drive that road very much. I hardly drive any at all. But I'll take the money I should pay to fix that road and spend it on my own driveway. And I don't think that's right. And I think that's sort of what's going on. If the public school is not something you want for your kid and you want to pursue something outside of that, you should have to pay for it.
Well, a Democrat has not held a statewide position in 30 years. If you do earn the nomination on the Democratic ticket, you'd most likely go up against Greg Abbott, who would be going for his fourth consecutive term. If you look back at his past three elections, he's won very easily, sometimes by more than 1 million votes. So, with that kind of stacked against you, you have the history there. It hasn't been a Democrat in 30 years. You have a very uh, governor who has won these elections very easily. How do you beat him? How do you beat a Republican? And how do you beat Governor Greg Abbott?
Well, like I said, I'm going to cast a little shade on both parties here. Um, the Democratic Party really had some working man bona fides back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they rested on that laurel and really hadn't advocated truly for working people in a long time. I believe the Republican Party has picked up that mantra of working man rule voter and promised them a lot of things, but I feel like they failed them too, and have done a bait and switch. And with that being said, I really think it's going to take a political outsider to really bring change to Texas politics. And with my background being from rural Texas, working class, I believe I can resonate with a lot of voters in rural Texas. And far as money, I'm never going to be able to compete dollar wise with the amount that he's accumulated. And we can talk about how he uh, accumulated that much and what were the reasons behind it, but I can't match it. I'm going to have to depend on people who hear my message, resonate with it, see the authenticity of who I am, and want to contribute to the campaign. With that being said, I don't have to raise as much money if I can get a grassroots at neighbor telling neighbor, this guy's for us, he understands us, he listens to us because he's one of us. And just for a little bit of math, in these big metropolitan areas, when Democrats tally up the vote, they get 1.5 million votes out of there, you know. And but when you get done with those counties, there's 235 counties that are predominantly rural that vote for Abbott, 70 to 30% for the Democratic candidate. That's been the last several elections. If my message can connect like I think it can, and I shave 10 points off his rural votes, that's a 20-point swing. All of a sudden, you've got a race that's very, very close. And if I can pull 11%, I start to run away with it. So that's the theory of the case.
Yeah, so let's talk about those rural counties. That's a great point. They usually Democrats perform poorly in those rural counties. So I'm interested to know what have you been your efforts so far to gain this grassroots movement, especially in those rural areas?
Well, it's messaging and pointing out where Abbott has failed rural Texans and rural communities. Um, like I said, education is abysmal no matter where you want to pick a ranking where we're at nationally, it's not nothing to write home about. And then far as healthcare, we're failing with that miserably too. Not expanding Medicaid is malfeasance and misfeasance. The national government wanted to return to Texans the money they had paid in to help with their health care, and Abbott denied it. There's two things with that. Um, there's been studies done, and they vary from $2 to $3, but for every dollar you invest in these rural communities in healthcare, the economic stimulus is $2 to $3. Annually, Texas turns away $50 billion. So if you just go to a 2 to 1 far as economic stimulus, that's billion dollars of economic stimulus each and every year for the state of Texas, and we turn it away. And then by not expanding Medicaid, we lead the nation in hospital closures over the last decade. That has real consequences for Texans in these communities. You get worse healthcare outcomes. People do and will die because there's not a readily available emergency medical attention. And if you have a heart attack or stroke, time is of the essence with both of them. If you're not receiving definitive care within an hour, you're probably not going to make it. Or if you do, your abilities and your outcome are greatly diminished. So these are all things he's doing to rural communities. And if you attack the schools and you want to try to privatize the schools, and you're not funding health care, and then you're not, usually Republicans, it'll come around every so often. They want to go after the office and close them because privatizing would be more advantageous and profitable. Their words, not mine. But you take the school, the hospital, and the post office out of a lot of these rural communities. What do you have? You don't have much. And so they claim to be for rural communities, but their policies don't back it up. And that's my message everywhere I go out here in rural Texas, and it resonates with them. And we hadn't even got into affordability yet.
So you have been meeting with rural Texans. What kind of thing are they? Is it mostly the healthcare aspect of it that they talk to you
Oh,
about?
healthcare is a big deal. Education's a big deal. A lot of the farmers are upset with the tariffs. I mean, tariffs are running costs up through the roof. Fertilizer, pipe, steel, equipment cost, equipment repair. And you get out here in West Texas and the panhandle of Texas and down the Rio Grande Valley where they do a lot of big farming. The tariffs are, I mean, the soybean industry's being hacked off at their knees. You know, China bought like $12 billion worth of soybeans last year. You know how much they've bought in soybeans this year?
Mm-mm.
Zero. So if you don't think this is having a devastating effect in Texas, well, then you hadn't been paying attention. And this is what this campaign's about. I'm for rural Texas, rural communities, and I'm for farmers and trying to get them stable and fair markets where it's hard enough to fight the weather and drought and market conditions status quo. But when you throw tariffs on it that you put on and off, you can't forecast from one season to the other whether
Mm-mm.
you can even be profitable. And eventually, that's going to erode the entire agricultural underpinning of this state. And
As a,
so I
sorry.
think I think all these things start to add up. And the grade on Greg Abbott as governor is coming back not good.
Yeah. As a Texas governor, though, could you help these farmers with? I mean, with tariffs, that's something that's out of your control. It's a federal decision. So, what would be the way you could help farmers here with affordability and dealing with tariffs?
Well, I don't know. First of all, I would try standing up for him and fighting for him. Greg Abbott doesn't say one word about the tariffs and how it's affecting the people of his state. And then, second of all, um, Texas surely is not defenseless in what happens to their citizens. We're the second biggest economy in the nation, and I believe the eighth biggest in the world. There's things we could do. We could probably utilize some Trump tactics and use them in reverse and say, hey, um, you can't sit here and continue to cause Texans to suffer without us standing up and defending ourselves. And so that's where I would go with that. First of all, you got to have a governor that will stand up for you and say something about how it's hurting everyday ordinary Texans in your state. And it's not happening now.
Bobby, is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
Um, you've heard a lot of the issues I'm I'm about education and healthcare affordability. But this is a working man's campaign. It's a populist campaign. Um, I'm for workers, men and women, old or young, brown, black or white. Workers are workers, whether they're urban or suburban, they're everywhere in the state. And that's who I'm fighting for. And believe you me, I understand your struggles. I understand what it is to worry about how you're going to, pay your bills and keep a roof over your head and raise your kids. And then hopefully at the end of it all, you get a few years to enjoy your retirement with dignity. And with the attack on some of the earned benefits with Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, it shows a severe lack of respect by our governor and our president about how hard the working people work. They're the ones that fuel the economy, drive the economy, and built the economy. They deserve our respect and they deserve to be invested in first instead of an afterthought. And if anybody that's listening likes what they hear, you can go to coalforgovernor.com to help support and donate.